Hello, today we're going to review decimals. Now we started the decimal unit off with pictures. Notice the first picture we have here. There is 10 equal pieces in this square, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded. Therefore, we're going to represent the shaded region as a fraction as 4/10. But we learned that fractions can also be represented as decimals. So we can also write 4/10 simply as 4/10. And we learned that any digit to the right of the decimal point is representing a piece of a whole. In this problem here, we have a piece of a whole that is shaded. Notice the entire figure is not shaded. Therefore, we represent it as a piece of a whole. Now that's where the digit right after my decimal point can be represented as the tenths place. However, in this problem here, we have a lot more shaded in. In fact, this picture has 100 equal pieces in my square. And we're going to count how many are shaded. We have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68. So we can represent this piece of a whole as 68 hundredths. But notice I'm saying hundredths, and we discovered that after my decimal point, if we hear hundredths, that means we're going to have two digits after my decimal point. So I'm going to represent this as 68 hundredths. Notice this is 68 hundredths in fraction form, and this is 68 hundredths in decimal form. We discover that after my decimal point are pieces of a whole, and again, we have our tenths place as the first digit, and when we have two digits after my decimal point, that means we hit the hundredths place. Now, as we move forward, we practice writing these fractions in decimal notation. Now, this first one here, we have 4 hundredths, and we learned that if we have hundredths, we're going to have two digits after my decimal point. Some of you are drawing lines like this representing your tenths and your hundredths. If we hear 4 hundredths, that means my digit in my hundredths place is going to be a 4, but I need to still represent that a digit in my tenths place, so we're going to represent that with a 0. Notice this is 4 hundredths in fraction form, this is 4 hundredths in decimal form. But now here we have 44 hundredths, and again I'm hearing hundredths again. That means I'm going to have two digits to the right of my decimal point, and I'm going to represent 44 hundredths simply as 44 hundredths. Now here we have 13 hundredths. Again, hundredths, two digits after my decimal point, representing 13 hundredths just like this. Now we have 2 tenths, and we learned that 2 tenths is equivalent to 20 hundredths. And we can represent and prove that this is true because we can multiply my numerator and denominator both by 10. So if I did 2 times 10, that's going to show me that I get 20. If I did 10 times 10, I'm going to get 100 as my new denominator. Now notice when I multiply both my numerator and denominator by the same number, it helps me determine and find an equivalent fraction. So 2 tenths is equivalent to 20 hundredths, but we can simply write 2 tenths simply as 2 tenths. Just like that. Now some of you might have written 2 tenths and said, you know what, I'm going to write it as 20 hundredths. And we already discovered that these are both equivalent. So there really is no reason when you have a 0 at the end to include that. So you can write 20 hundredths or 2 tenths as your answer. But you're going to find for many of the activities we do, you don't see these extra zeros at the end. Now, as we moved forward, we worked on representing fractions as decimals, but we also need to understand how to represent these fractions and decimals on a number line. This number line is from 0 to 1, and I see 1/2, which we discovered 1/2 is exactly the same as 5 tenths. And I can also write 5 tenths as 5 tenths in decimal form as well. Now, our goal is to find the location of 41 hundredths, which 41 hundredths would be just a little bit below 5 tenths. And the letter that is just a little bit below 5 tenths is letter B. Now, to help you whenever dealing with number lines is to always first look at it. What are the numbers between? We have 0 to 1 on my number line. Notice it doesn't go all the way up to 10 or 20. We just have between 0 to 1, and we also have 5/10. Now, it might be helpful for you in these situations to number your number line. Now, if I know my question's asking me about decimals and maybe 41/100ths, maybe it might be helpful to break it up into tenths: 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10 to help you decide where am I going to put the 41/100ths. It might be helpful for you to label it. So you can label this as 1/10. Now you can choose to write 1/10 if you see 1/10, but you might also see 1/10. You can choose to number your number line either way, or some of you might number it all as fractions, but then you see that your questions are asking for decimal form. But that's okay because you know 1/10 is the same as 1/10 here. And then you can continue on. We have 2/10, 3/10. Now I'm trying my best to label this, but on your paper, this is where you really want to rewrite everything so it makes it very easy for you solving these problems. 4/10, we have 5/10, 6/10, 7/10. Now I'm trying to break this equally into 10 equal pieces. I'm trying my best on here. Your goal is to make them exactly 10 equal pieces, but you simply try your best. And next we have 9/10, and then we have 1. Now, if this problem asks us for another question saying, what does letter C represent? I would simply look at my number line and I see that C is approximately 8/10. And hopefully that would be one of my answer choices, but because I already labeled my number line, it makes answering the questions much easier. Now next, we moved on to problems like this. Determine if the value shown is more or less or equal to a half. But from the previous problem, we determined that 1/2 is the same as 5/10. 1/2 is the same as 50/100ths. And you can also write 1/2 simply as just the fraction 1/2. These are all equivalent to 1/2. Now when we see 48/100ths, I'm going to write 5/10 because we determined that was the same as 1/2. So if I was to compare these, I look in my ones place, I see that they're both 0. Now I'm going to move to my tenths. I see that 48/100ths has a digit 4 in the tenths place, or a value of 4/10, while here we have 5/10. Now 4/10 is less than 5/10. Therefore 48/100ths is going to be less than 1/2. And then we continued on to more comparing number problems. So here we have 5 and 4/10, and we have 5 and 40/100ths. Now notice I'm looking at my ones place and I see that they're both a 5. Then I look at my tenths place, I see that they're both a 4. Now I'm going to move to my hundredths and it's a 0 here, and I don't see anything here, but I can still include a 0. And you discovered in the previous problems that 4/10 is the same as 40/100ths. Therefore, these two numbers are equal. Even if they don't include the 0, they do, they're still equal because 4/10 is the same as 40/100ths. Now here, we're going to do the same thing, work our way from left to right. The digit in my ones place is a 1. Then I'm going to move to my tenths. I see here that it's 3 and here it's 6. 3 is less than 6, therefore 1 and 34/100ths is less than 1 and 69/100ths. And finally, we had number sentences. Your goal here is to go number sentence, go answer each number sentence and determine which number sentence is true. So I'm going to read each of these to determine that. I have 79/100ths is greater than 97/100ths. Well, I see in my tenths place here we have a 7 and here we have a 9, therefore this has to be less than, so that's not correct. Now I'm going to look at this one. It says 2 and 54/100ths is less than 2 and 45/100ths. I look at my ones, I see that they're both a 2. I look at my tenths, I see this is a 5 and this is a 4. Therefore, 2 and 54/100ths should be greater than 2 and 45/100ths. So this cannot be an answer choice. Now I'm going to move to my next one. 1 and 42/100ths is less than 1 and 24/100ths. Again, I'm going to start with my ones place. I see a 1 and a 1. I'm going to move to my tenths. I see a 4 and then a 2. 4 is much larger than 2. Therefore, this number sentence is not correct. Now I have 7 and 9 hundredths is less than 7 and 90 hundredths. I look at my ones and I see they're both a 7, so I move to my tenths. I see we have a 0 in the tenths place here and a 9 here. 0 is less than 9, therefore this number sentence is correct. So D is my correct answer. Now, you might see problems today that might have boxes, and as you all know, boxes means you're going to have more than one answer. So you might see 6 number sentences, and it might say choose 2 correct answers. That means it's a box question, which means you are going to be answering 2 answers, and you're going to be selecting 2 answer choices for your final answer. It might say, here's 8 problems, okay? Now, out of these 8 problems, please select 3 correct answers. That means you're going to check off 3 boxes that you feel that those represent the correct answers and the correct number sentence. As always, when you're completing these problems today, please, please, please read the directions, okay? You guys have been working hard on decimals for the past few days, and even prior to this, you've been doing decimals for a while. I know you guys have a full understanding of this, and you're going to do a great job on today's activities. As always, this summarized all our entire decimal unit. Feel free to look back at this video at any time.